For 3 weeks, Yayan and Sally did not meet. He thought of her constantly. The uncertainty drove him into a state of abysmal gloom, and he began to imagine the worst. His studies and his promises were forgotten. He became listless, dispirited, and the complete indifference he showed towards his work at the core shop made Abraham fume with indignation. The charge hand approached him one afternoon. "You've been here for 2 years now. 2 years this month," he said, disgruntled. "I've been talking to Lew about you, and he's arranging for you to go out with the improvers next week." Yayan's heart sank. "I wouldn't like to be transferred to the steel shop," he said. "Listen, Abraham, couldn't you let me stay here? Isn't there any way you could persuade Lew to change his mind?" "It isn't a question whether you like it or not," Abraham retorted with a frown. "If Lew says it's time you had to move, well, that's that. Don't ask me to try and make him change his mind. It's out of my hands. Besides, I don't feel like talking to him just now, not with Lew in the mood he's in. He's like a bear with a sore head these days." Half an hour later, when the furnace was almost ready to be tapped, Yayan returned to the steel shop. Lew, his arms folded, stood on the plank covering the pit. He peered at the men from under the peak of his cap as they bustled around in the casting bay getting the moulds ready. "Get a move on," he rasped. "It's up ladle at 3. You've got 10 minutes left. Hey you, Dick Reese," he called. "Don't stand there like an ornament. Give Frank a hand with that spindle." He pointed to a mould, its top and bottom halves contained in 2 steel boxes, approximately 7 feet long by 3 wide and 3 deep. Frank and his partner finished their work on the spindle. A team of furnace men appeared on the landing. The furnace was tapped. A river of white hot metal raced madly down the clay-lined trough. Yayan stepped back and shielded his eyes. He felt his cheeks burning with a fierce heat. The first burst of liquid steel plunged into the ladle with a loud, ominous thud that shook the girders. A white sheet of flame shot into the air and flashed out over the ladle rim. An umbrella of dancing sparks twinkled and showered to the floor, spitting viciously as they fell upon the row of cold steel boxes ranged along the casting bay. The ladle filled almost to the brim. Tiny red and blue flames darted from the air holes in the riveted sides, hungrily licking the soot-covered plates. Around the lip of a circle of yellow-tipped tongues curled and weaved. Yayan looked on, fascinated. A new world had suddenly been revealed, a fairyland of coloured lights, of shooting stars, flickering shadows. The men waited in the casting bay, taking advantage of the short lull. They sat on their haunches or leaned against the moulds. Their green faces were tinged momentarily with a ruddy glow, then kissed by the shadows that danced across the foundry. Frank climbed up over the boxes. As the ladle swayed along to the next mould, he tilted a bucket of powdered blacking onto the bubbling steel and prodded the thick crust with a long iron rod. Then the clamour ceased as suddenly as it had begun. The cast was over, and the empty ladle was swung back to its bed beneath the furnace landing. The teamer glanced sideways at Yayan. "Nice work, isn't it?" He dipped his arms elbow deep into the Bosch. "The point would go down well now." Yayan gave him a forced smile, not knowing what to say. The teamer walked back towards the empty ladle. All at once, he wheeled sharply around, his eyes wild with fear. He rushed to the Bosch and grasped Yayan's shoulder. "Look, boy, the spindle, it's running out. Call the man quickly. Frank's down there, trapped like a bloody rabbit." A wild, piercing scream cleaved the air. A moulder ran out from the casting bay. "Help, for God's sake, help!" he shouted frantically. "Give us a hand, quick, the spindle's burst." The moulders left their jobs and came rushing down the shop. Yayan did not wait for them. Pushing the agitated teamer aside, he raced over the pit. He stumbled into the casting bay. Suddenly, he stopped. Before him, his eyes dilated with terror, stood Frank on one foot, precariously balanced on a single brick near the centre of a rapidly filling pool of white, hot metal. Momentarily the foot slipped from the brick, and he screamed, "Doris! Doris! Jesus! Doris! Doris!" Frank's agonizing cries shrieked above the thunder of the cranes as they jerked to a standstill on the quivering girders. "Phone the doctor! Hurry, for God's sake!" Without further hesitation, he threw a board over the space, tore off his jacket and darted forward, throwing it around the tortured Frank's body. He grasped him in his arms and dragged him to safety. Gently, he laid him on the ground. The crowd of men, whispering and gesticulating, closed in around the prostrate figure. "Make way there," someone shouted authoritatively. Pritchard, the timekeeper, followed by two others carrying a stretcher, pushed his way to the front. From a small box he took out a bottle of greenish liquid, pads of cotton wool and rolls of bandage. He called the stretcher bearers to his side. "Easy now." Lew tenderly raised him to a sitting position. Frankie, he choked. "God, why did I send you to do that job?" He looked into the timekeeper's face. "It's too late," he sobbed. "Nothing can be done." Yayan moved in with the crowd. His face blanched. He swayed on his feet and grasped a box for support. The scene swam before his eyes. He felt as though he were going to collapse. His heart seemed to stop beating. A violent retching seized him. He closed his eyes. Someone gripped him by the shoulders. "Steady on, son." He opened his eyes. The crowd dispersed slowly. They stood in groups under the furnace landing, their eyes intent on the prostrate figure lying in the dust. The streets were deserted as Yayan walked wearily homewards, and the only sound he heard was the dragging of his heavy boots along the pavement. Frank's terrifying screams shrilled in his ears. Try as he would to rid himself of them, their echoes still persisted. He lived over and over again the catastrophic moment of that afternoon, and the present seemed an eternity of agony. Blindly, he walked on, his mind obsessed by the tragedy. At the corner of the street where he lived, a figure waited, vague in the dim light that shone down from the lamppost. He drew near. The figure turned. "Yayan! Sally, it's you!" He looked at her, distraught. "You're ill, Sally. Why are you out?" "Oh, Yayan, I heard the awful news, and I just had to come and see you." "But you shouldn't be out. Please go back." "I'm better now, Yayan. Truly I am. Much better, and I felt I must see you." He grasped her hand tightly. "That was lovely of you, Sally, but you shouldn't have." Suddenly, a wild paroxysm of grief seized him. He began to sob unrestrainedly. "Please, please, Yayan." Her voice was eloquent with pity. Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Yayan. So sorry for him. It was horrible." Yayan looked into her face. "He was a fine man, Sally," he choked. "He was the only pal I had." He brushed away his tears roughly. His eyes glinted with anger. "The foundry did it, Sally. The foundry killed him." "Yes, Yayan, the foundry did it. Everybody knows that. That's why I came to see you tonight. You must get away from it now, Yayan." "I will see you Saturday night, will I?" No, you mustn't, Sally." "But I'm better, Yayan," she insisted softly. He stood a while before giving his answer. "Please, Yayan?" "All right then, I'll meet you, Sally. But if you're not fit, you mustn't come out." "No," she said. "If I feel ill, I shan't come." She kissed him lightly on the cheek. "At the park, Yayan? I'll meet you there at 6. And please don't worry about Well, you know. There was an awkward silence in the house that evening when he entered. His mother and father sat at the table. A place had been prepared for him, but he wanted nothing. He felt no hunger. A deep aching pain gripped him in the pit of his stomach. His father looked up. You had bad news at the foundry, Yayan. I'm so sorry. Yes, it was a shock indeed, said his mother. Terrible accident. The poor chap didn't have a chance, so I was told. Burned to a cinder, and they say he was screaming something awful, Dick. I saw him, ma'am. I saw him lying there on the ground. He called on Christ and, of course, the poor fellow must have suffered agonies. But you must pull yourself together, stop worrying about the foundry. It's an awful thing to say, but what is to be, will be. Leave yourself go to pieces, Yayan, and where will it get you? Life is short enough, and you can't afford to be making yourself ill like this. Go and have a wash now. You'll feel better then, and after you've had something to eat. She filled a pan with hot water from the kettle and got a towel ready for him. Today the poor fellow died, she said half to herself. That means his funeral will be on Friday afternoon. You'll have to have a new hat, Yayan. A bowler. It's a bit of an expense, but I think I'll be able to manage somehow. Yayan stared fixedly in front of him. Don't worry, ma'am. Frank wouldn't mind if I wore a hat or not. Yayan waited. The town hall clock struck 6, and Sally had not come. 15 minutes passed. A half hour, and still Yayan waited. Fear began to assail him. She was ill again? Why had she disregarded the doctor's orders and come out to meet him on the night of Frank's death? If only she had listened. She said she was better, and he had believed her. But tonight, where was she? Anxiety drove him to pace slowly up and down the road, and his mind was torn with indecision. Should he call at her home and inquire? Finally, he made his decision. He would call at the house. Is Sally in? He asked nervously. Come in. She's in bed, said the woman. She looked at him, smile on her face. You are Yayan? Sally has told me a lot about you, she said. She's very fond of you, poor little thing. Would you like to see her? Yes, Mrs. Marvin. The mother showed him into a small bedroom. A lamp burned on a table at the bedside. I'll leave you here for a while. She stepped across to the bed and drew up a chair for him. Sally lay back in the pillows, her pale face turned to the light. Her eyes smiled at him. Yayan, I'm sorry about tonight. I would have come, but I just... That's all right, Sally. He patted her hand, resting on the coverlet. I guessed you were ill. That's why I came. I tried to get someone to let you know, Yayan, but there was no one. I'm so glad you've come. He forced a smile to his lips. Now, Sally, you mustn't worry. That's what you always tell me. He drew his chair closer. What happened, Sally? That night when you waited for me, you caught a chill? She turned her head away from him. No, it's worse than that, Yayan, he heard her say, and her voice seemed as though it came from far away. I've got TB. Doctor says I've got to go away. How long, I don't know. 6 months, perhaps? His heart pounded. There was a tightness in his throat. No, Sally, don't say that, he pleaded. There may be some mistake. They're not always right. His words, his manner, were unconvincing, and he knew it. And yet the doctor could be wrong. It was a hope, and he clung to it, refusing to accept the fact that she was seriously ill. Did he not diagnose chronic bronchitis? Why had he changed his opinion so soon? If Sally was tubercular, surely he would have discovered so when he examined her, or he would have sent her to the tuberculosis clinic. Sally, how did the doctor come to think that? He asked. He may be wrong, you know. No, Yayan, there's no mistake. I've got TB. You mustn't think of it, Sally. Last night, Yayan, her voice was muffled. She began to cough. Sally, please don't say anything. He reached for a glass of water on the small table. You must rest. You'll get better and you'll be out of bed again before you know where you are. And we'll go for a picnic again. Remember the picnic, Sally? That day in the woods? It was lovely. We'll get to lots of places together, you and me. You must get well soon. It will be a long time, and I shan't see you again. I'm going away. But I'll come back, and then we'll have our picnic, Yayan. Where? Where are they taking you, Sally? His lips quivered. His eyes were misty with tears. To Calon and Os. Tomorrow morning the ambulance will be here. Oh, Yayan. She buried her face in the pillows. Her shoulders shook with her sobbing. He leaned over the bed and grasped her gently. Please, Sally. He kissed her forehead. Please. But words failed him. He walked to the door. I'll come and see you. Soon, he promised, at Calon and Os. He walked aimlessly home. As he drew near the kitchen, he heard his father and mother quarrelling. He stopped, his body rigid with apprehension. It's that girl, Dick, spending far too much of his time he is with her. He's out with her tonight again. As sure as my name's Millie Morgan, he'll be having her in trouble one of these days. Yayan turned. He could stand it no longer. He ran blindly along the streets and the deserted lanes, ran until exhaustion brought him panting for breath outside the school gates on the hill he had climbed so often as a child. He was once again in the land of memories. The walls, the asphalt playground, the iron railings, all reminded him of those days so far away. The atmosphere breathed a sense of quietude. Ghost-like, the school reared before him. Beyond the gate, fenced in by a broken railing, stood the old stone quarry. He walked towards it through the wet grass, his mind almost bereft of conscious reason. He stared down into the deep pit. A stone dislodged and hurtled to the bottom. The wind whistled to the grass. It drove against him, threatening to push him over the quarry brink into the engulfing space below. Perhaps it would be simpler if he offered no resistance, he thought. In the far distance, a railway engine puffed. A yellow trail of sparks spat from the funnel. The engine gathered speed and chugged into the nowhere of darkness. Beyond, the waves in the estuary roared shorewards. The sea moaned and tossed like an awakened conscience. A furnace door on the steelworks on the bank of the estuary was raised, and the glow cut a red hole in the night. Here, in the deep quarry, he had played with the eagerness and abandon of childhood. It was a place of happy memories. Here he had galloped on the proud white stallion his imagination had given him, when he and his companions, in those carefree days of sunshine, were heroes all. Remembrances of yellow noons in yellow days of childhood, when all was fair and lovely. The air shimmered and danced, and little houses in the winding streets laughed to the sun. In those days, when he was but a tiny spot on the surface of his native earth, his heart leapt into his throat with the joy of living. He loved then the earth, the trees, the grass, the flowers, the sky, the sun, the rain and the wind, and every living bird and beast and man and woman that walked with him in the fair days of the summer world. Do you expect things to fall into your lap? Oh, Yayan, your studies. he saw Frank and Sally. God, what had come over him? He must face up to life, face up to his problems. He had talent given him. It was his duty to make use of it. Sally, Frank. Let fears of Sally's illness consume him no longer. She would get well, and they would know happiness again. He must have faith and courage. He must. Nor let the fear of the foundry plunge him again into sorrow and despair. Some day he would get away from it. He had the weapon in his own heart and brain. He would use them. He would study hard and diligently. No more the idle dreaming, the procrastinations. And then one day he would be free. Free from the foundry. Free to write of it as he would want to write. To show the world how the men there lived and worked. Write of their hopes, their sufferings. But, above all, reveal the true spirit of men like Frank. Men of strong faith and courage. With this new resolution burning within him, he ran down the hill. No longer was he afraid. A new hope had been born to him. A new life had been given to him. Along the road he raced, riding the same proud white stallion of his childhood. His body felt suddenly freed of all ache and pain. His mind was eased of fear and sorrow. Not even the chill blast of the wailing November wind did he feel as he turned into the street where he lived and knocked loudly on the door.